Is there psychic life in animals? Quote, "The faculty of consciousness of systematic actions develops in animals in accordance with the development of the nervous system and reaches the mammalia an already sufficiently high degree." F. Ingalls. The presence of psychic faculties in animals seems rather indisputable to the majority of people. Can someone doubt the intelligence, ingenuity, and shrewdness of his dog or cat? The same can be heard from the lovers of horses. All these animals, according to their masters, understand when they are spoken to, get offended, deceive, etc. Let us analyze these conceptions: intelligence, understanding, ingenuity, offense, deceit, etc., irrespective of whom they concern. We shall have to admit that they constitute the basic psychic processes and states which are familiar to us, first of all, on the basis of personal experience and impressions. We should thus acknowledge that there are no differences in the psychic processes which are taking place in man or animal. Will this conclusion be correct? In speaking of the theory of Darwin, we have already had an occasion to state that everything living in the world is developing gradually and reaches progressively higher and higher steps on the evolutional ladder. This law embraces also those functions of the nervous system which are connected with the so-called psychic processes. In the chapter devoted to the question of instincts, we shall attempt to clarify it as much as possible. Every function of the organism undergoes a process of evolution, which means that the psychic facilities or faculties in animals are also developing and undergoing changes. To attribute to animals, even those of higher level of development, the faculty of carrying out psychic functions as they are known in the highest living creature, man, is incorrect. This would mean to pay tribute to that imperfect stage of science when man, unable to analyze the complex peculiarities of animal behavior, would transfer to the animal everything he knew of psychic as based on his observations of himself. Though this attitude, which virtually identifies the psychic reactions of a cat or dog with those of man, is not justified scientifically, it is nevertheless firmly rooted in our everyday life. The reason for it can be found in the history of the development of scientific ideas on this subject. Way back, during the period of the origin of the first scientific observations of the phenomena of psychic activity, two contrasting approaches were traced in regards to this problem. Democritus, over 2,000 years ago, attempted to create a materialistic approach in stating that the soul and its activity is the result of the movement of very fine imperfect particles of matter. About the same time, Plato was developing a diametrically opposite teaching. The soul, according to him, was an immortal, non-material substance which was different from somatic matter. The soul was not united with the body in one entity and could separate itself from the body. We are speaking now of this long past era in the history of the study of psychic activity, in order to remind you that, already in ancient times, two approaches in this field, the materialistic and idealistic, were diametrically opposed to each other. According to the ideas of the ancients, there was nothing in common between the psychic processes in animals and humans. Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, was the first to advance the teaching of three steps of psychic activity: vegetable, animal, and that of reasoning. The first was referred to the world of plants, the second to the animal kingdom, and the third to man, the only living creature endowed with intelligence and a reasoning mind. It must be acknowledged that Aristotle tried to introduce the idea of the development and perfection of psychic activity. One cannot help seeing it in the prototype of the historic method of study of psychic activity. However, the defective facets of this teaching became visible at once. Descartes, the most eminent philosopher and naturalist of the 17th century, sharpened the defects of Aristotle's teaching and advanced the teaching that an animal is only capable of reaction of a machine type, while a human being is a creature endowed with a mind. The teaching of the machine characteristics of animals did not correspond to facts, which anybody could see, even in observations at home. This is the reason why a mechanistic point of view of the animal behavior lost its authority in the eyes of many scientists. As a sort of peculiar reaction to it, appeared the zoological or zoopsychological trend in science. Its adherents insisted that animals are, like humans, endowed with a will. Here, they come across natural difficulties in connection with the problem of the means of studying the soul of an animal, especially when one speaks of the soul of a worm or a paramecium and other low-organized animals and protozoa. The zoopsychologists replied to this that the method of study which they employ consists of observing various changes in animal behavior as they manifest themselves externally, and of the subsequent interpretation of these causes of the changes on the basis of comparison of the psychic characteristics of animal and man. Thus we see here the aim to legitimize the subject method or subjective method as a scientific method of investigation against which, as we had indicated above, rose the creator of the objective method of the observation, Pavlov, with all his irreconcilable and absolute determination. The above cited data show that the method of conditioned reflexes of Pavlov does not occur with any previous trend. Each of these trends either identified animal with machine or, on the contrary, identified animal with man, which did not correspond to reality. The presence of psychic faculties in animals which reach a certain level of development caused no doubts under careful observation. Therefore, the task of science was to find a method of investigation which would exclude the need of employing our own psychic impressions, i.e., to eliminate the subjective method, and which we would at the same time be able to use and study psychics without denying subjective states. The Pavlov method of investigation of the psychic functions of an animal by means of conditioned reflexes possessed these possibilities. It would be erroneous to state that Pavlov denies psychics and fully identifies it with the physiological processes. This point of view did exist in science in general. It has been advanced by certain German and American scientists who insisted that psychic life does not and cannot exist in animals. Pavlov also thought that zoopsychology as a separate science cannot exist. However, the reasons for such a consolation by Pavlov were entirely different from those advanced by the above-mentioned scientists. These scientists thought that psychics is indigenous to man only. Thus, they supported the idealistic approach that there is a gap between man and animal in regard to their psychic faculties which cannot be filled. Pavlov did not deny. He very definitely recognized the psychic functions and states. He emphasized that psychics or psychic activity is the first phenomenon which man always encounters. The substance of disagreement was something else. The zoopsychologists considered it perfectly correct to interpret the behavior of amoebas, worms, fish, and other animals as based on the presence in them of mind, joy, nobility, and other qualities. Pavlov, in contrast to it, demanded a systematic objective analysis which would not depend on the internal states and impressions of man. There lies the substance of divergence in the approach to psychic phenomena of Pavlov and the zoopsychologists. Pavlov denies the right of the existence of zoopsychology as a science. We shall now turn to the basic results of the study of the animal psychic, obtained by means of objective methods developed by Pavlov. Out of the very large data collected in the experiments with monkeys, we shall describe only some of them which had been carried out under the personal supervision of Pavlov. The tests were conducted by means of specially constructed box. Inside the box, some bait was placed for the monkey to see, and the side door was slammed. The upper sliding door on top of the box had an aperture. Three sticks were placed near the monkey. Triangular, round, and quadrangular stick. When the sticks corresponding to the shape of the aperture of the top door is introduced into the opening, the side door opens up as a result of pressure on a lever inside the box. The monkey thus could obtain food. By means of this experiment, we could determine the ability of the monkey to select the proper stick which it needed to get the food. How was this problem solved by the monkey? At first, the monkey would get hold of any stick out of those placed before it and tried to push it into the opening of the top door. When it failed, the monkey would grab another stick and repeat the attempt to push it into the aperture. It lasted till the monkey got hold of the right stick which opened the door. These experiments were repeated during subsequent days. The monkey would spend progressively less time in locating the right stick. It finally acquired the skill to select at once the right stick which opened the side door. One can make the following deduction as to what guided the monkey in its progressive improvement in the selection of the right stick. Either it learned to correlate the shape of the stick with the shape of the aperture, or the visual, tactile, and muscular stimulants, which originated when the monkey grabbed the right stick, were fixed as a signal of correct selection. In the latter case, the usual conditioned reflex was formed, i.e. the connection between the sensations, taking the stick and the subsequent reinforcement of the sensation by obtaining the food. In regard to the first supposition, one should expect the formation of a more complex reaction. In this case, two series of stimulants would be correlated, none of them reinforced by the fact of getting hold of the food. One of these stimulus would be the shape of the aperture, the other the shape of the stick. The animal could not get its food before this association had been established. This type of reaction is a conditioned reflex nature and must be preferred to the type of a so-called association in view of its complex nature. This problem was solved not zoopsychologically, i.e. not by means of interpretations, but by means of an experiment. The shape of the aperture in the top of the door was changed. Instead of a triangular, a top door with a round aperture was inserted. In spite of that, the monkey kept on taking the triangular stick, which was good only for the previous top door. On the basis of that, we came to the conclusion that at the base of the habit acquired by the monkey was a conditioned reflex of the most elementary type. Did it exclude the possibility of the formation of associations? Additional tests were made to answer this question. We began to change the apertures in the box frequently for a period of several months. As a result of these procedures, the monkey learned to select without error the stick corresponding to the aperture. Obviously, more complex conditioned reflex contexts of the type of associations could be formed in monkeys. Further observations established the fact that, parallel with the above described elementary associations, the monkeys were capable of forming also more complex types of associations. To these belong chain associations, or as Pavlov called them, associated associations. Pavlov thought that our mental activity is based mainly on a long chain of stimuli or associations. In order to compare the mental activity of apes and man, it was essential to carry out such experiments which could elicit the ability of apes to form chain associations. The results of these tests were very definite. Raphael, one of the anthropoid monkeys which were under observation by Pavlov, learned to open the door to its room using the proper key. It learned to put out a fire which blocked its way to food by pouring water over it. Some experiments which had been conducted by a foreign investigator were repeated with positive results. They corroborated the fact that Raphael, like some other anthropoids, is able to obtain a bait suspended high by building a pyramid out of cubic boxes which were lying around and climbing on top of it. We shall cite an experiment carried out by Y.G. Rasturo, an associate of Pavlov, who made joint observations with his mentor on Raphael and its sister Rose. Quote, "On the wide platform of an aviary, at the height of 4 meters from the ground, hangs a cluster of grapes swinging in the air. Raphael sees it through the laboratory window, but the outside door is closed. The monkey runs to one of the adjacent rooms, finds the proper key, and opens the door which leads to a room adjacent to the summer aviary. Here Raphael meets with another obstacle, a box with fire which prevents him from getting out of the aviary. The monkey turns the faucet of water container placed above the water, or above the fire, puts out the fire and gets out of the aviary, where it sees many cubic boxes over the floor. The only way to get the hanging grapes is to build a pyramid. Raphael picks up the largest box and places it directly under the hanging bait. Subsequently, in the order of the diminishing sizes, it places box upon box until a high pyramid is formed. Then it climbs on top of it. The goal has been achieved, and the monkey eats the grapes while remaining on top of the pyramid. In another experiment, the monkey had to solve the problem of how to draw up to the cell the food which had been placed for outside the cell. To accomplish it, the monkey had at its disposal several pieces of bamboo cane. There were various diameters and lengths. However, they could be put together in a certain combination so that with the longer stick the monkey could get hold of the bait. Of much interest were the experiments with 2 rafts. We shall again avail ourselves of the description given by Rasturo in his book A Hot Summer Day. 2 rafts are placed in the lake at a distance of 5 meters from each other and 15 to 20 meters from the shore. On one of the rafts lies Raphael. The monkey changes its posture constantly, exposing to the sun its sides or its chest. From time to time, the monkey puts its hand in the lake and sprinkles itself with cold water. At other times, the monkey gets up, changes its seat for the edge of the float, and scoops up some water with a glass jar. At this time, the experimenter approaches the raft in a boat, places a charged device with fire on the raft and a few tied together bamboo sticks on the raft. Raphael generally uses the sticks to move from one raft to the other. The boat then approaches the other raft. Here a container of water is set up. The monkey is looking for a while at the fire. They add a fruit which is visible in the aperture of the fire device. 3-4 seconds pass. Here Raphael gets up holding the jar in its left hand. It approaches the edge of the raft, takes the bamboo stick in its right hand, and attempts to fling it to the other raft. The attempt fails. The glass jar is on the way. The monkey transfers the jar from the hand to the foot, flings the stick over to the other raft, and crosses over using the stick. It fills up the jar with water from the container, goes back to the first raft, and attempts to put out the fire. Not enough water. Raphael again returns to the raft with the water container, again fills up the jar, and finally puts out the fire in the apparatus. The results of this interesting experiment lead to 2 conclusions. In the first place, there is no doubt left of the ability of the monkey to evolve long chains of associations in the form of conditioned reflex connections which are replacing each other. It is not surprising that many who observed these experiments were left with the impression of conscious reasoning in Raphael's actions. At that, the question arises, why did the monkey, which was perfectly able to draw water from the lake, go through all these complicated actions of moving the raft to raft just to obtain water from the tank? It seems that the animal could have acted much more intelligently had it drawn water from the lake to put out the fire. This is the basic question for the comparison of intelligence of monkeys and that of a human being. At the same time, it presents no difficulty to answer it in connection with the present state of science. We shall clarify later the conditions of the origin of thinking in man, which was based on the development of the functions of the second signal system, speech and personal contact through speech. The monkeys do not possess this highest evolutional achievement. The cited facts clearly attest to it. The monkey is able to manipulate water and use it correctly and purposefully for putting out the fire. but it is at the same time depraved of the general concept of water as such. The water represents to the monkey a perfectly concrete stimulus only. In this sense, the water in the tank which puts out the fire, the water in the lake with which the animal moistened its body, the water which can fall on the earth in the form of rain, etc., all appear in the conscience of the animal as absolutely independent entities. In order to generalize all these facts from the field of an idea of water, millions of years of evolution of the psychics of animals as well as the appearance of man, the only representatives of the animal world who turned out to be capable of such generalizations. The basic conditions for this process will be described later. Engels created the teaching of the evolution of monkey into the direction of humanization as the result of working social necessities and of the origin of speech sounds connected with it. N. Ladgynia Coates, one of the pioneers of scientific study of the intellectual faculties of monkeys, carried out special experiments in order to ascertain what extent are higher monkeys capable of the development of occupational actions. The observations were conducted on macacas. The monkeys were subjected to motor tests of various complexity of opening locks, which were put in the cell door. A single hook, combination of hooks, and various latches. As a stimulant to make the monkeys work, food was used which was placed in a locked cell. The combination of locks was brought up to high complexity, including, for instance, 8 books, a self-locking or 8 hooks, a self-locking latch, pin bolt, etc. The author pays special attention to the problem of the role of occupational acts in the network processes of monkeys. In recalling the words of Marx that, at the end of the work process comes the result which is present ideally, i.e., in the imagination of the worker, before the start of the work, Ladgynia Coates arrives at the conclusion that the actions carried out by the monkeys are not work acts. The actions of a monkey are narrow, dull, and specifically limited as to the sphere and to the range of their manifestations. It expresses precisely the absence of the idea of the purpose of a given action which, as Marx stated, changes it into a working process. In the experiments described above, which Pavlov carried out on Raphael and Rose, were also included the tasks of the study of the problem whether monkeys are capable of creating work tools. The results have shown that monkeys do not possess this faculty. They proved that at the base of the behavior of monkeys are the rules of conditioned reflexes activity, which are prone to acquire a highly complex form, depending on the increasing complexity of the effects of the external stimuli. However, the development of the higher nervous system of monkeys stopped at the level of the first signal system, for the reason that the monkeys were unable to produce work tools. The transformation of the stick which the monkey used for self-defense into a tool for tilling the soil was beyond the monkey's intelligence. Its thinking remained on the level of concrete ideas and was depraved of the ability of abstraction and generalization. There is a widespread opinion among many people that animals understand human speech. True, many facts indicate that dogs or horses and many other animals carry out errands and orders expressed in words or sentences just as if they know their names. However, an analysis of these instances of understanding of speech show that we deal here not with the content of the word, but with a definite combination of sounds which compose the word, and with the intonation connected with its pronunciation. If we shall pick out even some nonsensical but consonant combination of sounds and pronounce it with a certain intonation, the animal will respond to it with the same actions with which it had reacted to the correct word. There is nothing more in this understanding of speech than conditioned reflexes which are formed in response to complex sound combinations. We must realize that higher animals are able to form very complex and keen reflexes to the most diverse combinations of sounds, intonation, and gestures of man, even to his facial expressions. The understanding of speech by the animal is composed of these elements. It is curious that in training dogs one frequently uses foreign words according to tradition. The words are even distorted in pronunciation. You can try and ask the trainer, what is the meaning of a given pronounced word? In a number of cases you will receive no answer. The trainer himself does not know what is couch, apporte, etc. The dog, nevertheless, will lie down or bring down the thrown object when the command is uttered. You really cannot claim that the dog understands the words if the trainer himself does not know the translation into Russian and consequently does not know what they actually mean. The above stated refers fully else or also to the speech of parrots, crows, and other speaking animals. There is no doubt that the function of a sound formation and imitation is highly developed in some of them. It is just as certain, however, that there is not the least comprehension of the uttered words and phrases. It is another matter when a phrase learned by the parrot can be reinforced as a conditioned reflex. For example, the parrot learned some curse words by causing the bird pain while we pronounce the word. We are able to produce a conditioned reflex. As a result, this cuss word will become associated with the pain stimulus. The parrot will subsequently respond with an oath when subjected to pain. Such cases create a strong impression of the intelligence of speech of parrots and make some people think that these birds are capable of real speech. The above mentioned must not lead to the wrong conclusion that various sounds uttered by animals are not connected with some psychic states. On the contrary, according to numerous observations, most diverse sounds serve as a definite means of communication between the animals. It is sufficient to refer to the signals given by the leader of the herd on the approach of danger, the cries of the female calling its brood, and the cries of the nestlings asking for food, to notice the definite connection of the uttered sounds with the psychic state of the animal. If these sounds are reinforced by some stimulus, they become signals of the adaptation of behavior of the animals. In recent years, scientists succeeded by means of precise scientific methods of investigation to register various sounds uttered by monkeys under various living conditions. These vocal reactions are, of course, diverse and are related to the psychic states of the animals. However, under no circumstances can we call these sounds speech, which, as we stressed earlier, is inherent only in humans and has originated as the result of the evolutional development of monkeys in their social workday practice. This conclusion is the answer to the question put at the beginning of this chapter. Thus, we do not deny the presence of a certain level of psychic faculties in thinking in higher animals. This thinking, however, is limited and remains basically within the frame of concrete images or sensory thinking. Animals are not capable of making comparisons, abstractions, and generalizations. In other words, they are unable to form ideas. Higher thinking, i.e., thinking in ideas, is available only to humans, because only man possesses the audible speech, and each word already represents a generalization and an idea.